We needed the money more than you, my sister-in-law said when I found out they'd sold James's house the day of his funeral. They thought I was too grief-stricken to fight back. They were wrong. When the insurance investigator showed up with fraud charges, their greed became their downfall. My name is Catherine Walsh, and I learned that vultures come in all forms. Sometimes they even wear black to funerals and call you family. The funeral home smelled like lilies and regret. I sat in the front row, staring at James's casket, trying to make sense of a world that suddenly felt too big and too empty all at once. We'd been married for 8 years. 8 beautiful, complicated, ordinary years that ended with a heart attack at 34. Behind me, I could hear the whispered conversations of relatives and friends. Condolences mixed with gossip, memories blended with speculation about what would happen now. I wasn't listening, not really. I was thinking about the last thing James had said to me that morning. Don't forget to water the tomatoes, Kate. They're finally starting to turn red. Such a simple thing. Such a normal thing. I'd been annoyed because I was rushing to get ready for work, and he was worried about tomatoes. Now I'd give anything to hear him fuss about those plants again. Katie. A hand touched my shoulder. I turned to see James's older brother Michael standing behind me, his wife Patricia at his side. They looked appropriately somber, dressed in black, faces composed in practiced grief. How are you holding up? Patricia asked, her voice dripping with the kind of sympathy that sounds rehearsed. I'm managing, I said, which was a lie. I wasn't managing anything. I was drowning in paperwork and decisions and a grief so heavy it felt like wearing a lead blanket. Well, we want you to know we're here for you, Michael said. Family takes care of family. I nodded, grateful for any kindness. James's parents had died years ago, and Michael was all the family he'd had left. All the family I had left now, too. After the service, after the cemetery, after the awkward reception where people ate sandwiches and told me how sorry they were, I went home. To the house James and I had bought 3 years ago. The house we'd painted together, argued about, planned our future in. I sat on our couch, my couch now, and stared at the empty space where his reading chair used to be. I'd moved it to the basement after he died because looking at it hurt too much. Everything hurt too much. The phone rang. I almost didn't answer it, but it might have been the funeral home or the lawyer or one of the dozen other people I needed to talk to about death logistics. Mrs. Walsh. The voice was unfamiliar, professional. This is David Stern from Crossfield Real Estate. I'm calling to confirm the closing time for tomorrow morning. My blood went cold. I'm sorry, what closing? The closing on 847 Maple Street. The house sale. We're scheduled for 9 a.m. tomorrow. 847 Maple Street. My address. My house. There's been a mistake, I said, my voice barely working. I didn't put my house up for sale. A pause. Ma'am, I'm looking at the contract right here. Signed by Michael Walsh, as executor of the estate. The phone slipped from my hand. I drove to Michael's house in a daze, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. It was almost midnight, but their living room lights were on. Through the window, I could see them sitting at their dining room table with papers spread out in front of them. I didn't knock. I used the spare key James had given me years ago, the one they'd forgotten I had. They looked up when I walked in, and for just a moment, I saw panic flash across their faces before Michael composed himself. Katie, he said, standing slowly. What are you doing here? You sold my house. Patricia shifted in her chair. Katie, honey, you're upset. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking perfectly clearly. I picked up one of the papers from the table. It was a sales contract. For my house. Signed by Michael Walsh, listing himself as executor of James's estate. You sold my house while I was at my husband's funeral. It's not your house, Michael said quietly. Legally speaking. My legs gave out. I sank into the nearest chair. What are you talking about? Patricia leaned forward, her voice taking on that patient tone people use with children and the mentally unstable. James never updated the deed after you got married, Katie. The house is still in his name only, which means it goes to his next of kin. I'm his next of kin. I'm his wife. But you're not on the deed, Michael said. James told us he meant to add you, but he never got around to it. You know how he was about paperwork. I did know. James hated dealing with bureaucracy, always put off the tedious stuff. But this was our home. Even if that's true, I said, my voice getting stronger, you can't just sell it without telling me. I live there. My things are there. We'll give you time to find somewhere else, Patricia said generously. We're not heartless. How generous of you. I looked around their dining room, at the expensive furniture, the designer lighting. Why do you need the money so badly? They exchanged a look. Michael answered first. We have expenses. Kids' college tuition, the mortgage on this place. We needed the money more than you do. More than I do? My voice cracked. I just lost my husband. I'm facing his medical bills, funeral costs, and now you're making me homeless? You're young, Patricia said. You'll remarry. You'll be fine. There it was. The thing they'd probably been thinking all along. I was temporary. Replaceable. James was dead, so my connection to the family was severed. Besides, Michael added, James would have wanted his blood family to be taken care of. I was his family too. For 8 years, Patricia said dismissively. We've been his family his whole life. I stared at them, these people I'd considered family, people I'd spent holidays with, laughed with, grieved with. People who were now calmly explaining why they had more right to my home than I did. The closing is tomorrow at 9 a.m., Michael said. I suggest you start packing. I drove home in shock. My house, for one more night, anyway, sat dark and empty. I walked through the rooms James and I had shared, touching the walls we'd painted, the shelves we'd built together, the life we'd created. In his office, I found the filing cabinet where he kept all our important papers. Birth certificates, passports, insurance policies. I'd avoided going through it because it felt too final, but now I needed to understand exactly how they'd managed to steal my life out from under me. That's when I found the life insurance policy. $2 million. James had taken it out shortly after we got married, updating it every year. The beneficiary was listed clearly, Catherine Walsh, spouse. I found something else too. A folder marked property documents. Inside was a quitclaim deed, dated 6 months ago, signed by James and notarized. It transferred ownership of the house from James Walsh to James and Catherine Walsh, joint tenants with right of survivorship. My hands were shaking as I read it. He had added me to the deed. 6 months ago. The house wasn't just his, it was ours, which meant it was mine now. But if that was true, how had Michael managed to sell it? I called the real estate agent at 6 a.m. the next morning. Mr. Stern? This is Catherine Walsh. About the closing today. I need to know what documentation you received proving Michael Walsh has the right to sell this property. Well, he provided a death certificate for James Walsh and documentation showing he's the next of kin. What about the deed? Did you verify ownership? A pause. He said the property was solely in his brother's name. He provided what appeared to be a valid deed. I'd like to see that deed. Another pause. Mrs. Walsh, if there's a problem with the documentation. There is. A big one. The sale needs to be stopped immediately. I spent the next hour on the phone with lawyers, real estate agents, and the county recorder's office. What I discovered made my blood boil. Michael had forged a deed. He'd taken the original deed, the one showing only James's name, and presented it as current, hiding the quitclaim deed that added me as co-owner. When the buyers had done their title search, they'd found what appeared to be clear ownership by James Walsh, deceased, with Michael as his heir. But there was more. Much more. The insurance investigator knocked on Michael and Patricia's door at 3 p.m. that same day, just as they were supposed to be celebrating their newfound wealth. I wasn't there, but I heard about it later from their neighbor, Mrs. Chun, who called me immediately. Katie, dear, she said, there are police cars in front of the Walsh house. And some man in a suit who looks very serious. The investigator was Robert Martinez from Mutual Life Insurance. He'd been investigating James's death. Routine procedure for any policy over $1 million, especially when the insured was young and healthy. What he'd discovered was interesting. James hadn't died of a heart attack. He died of cardiac arrest caused by a massive overdose of digitalis, a heart medication he wasn't prescribed. The medication belonged to Michael, who'd been taking it for a heart condition for years. According to the toxicology report I wasn't supposed to see until much later, James had enough digitalis in his system to kill 3 people. Michael and Patricia's story was that they'd been having dinner with James the night before he died. Just family catching up. They'd made his favorite meal, wanted to cheer him up during his grief over losing his job the month before. What they didn't know was that James had installed a security system in our house after a break-in in our neighborhood. A system that recorded everything, including Michael slipping something into James's coffee, while Patricia distracted him with conversation about family memories. The insurance company had been investigating for weeks while I'd been drowning in grief. They'd found the security footage. They'd discovered the forged deed. They'd uncovered the plan to murder James and steal his assets before I could inherit anything. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed I was too grief-stricken and naive to fight back. They'd counted on me being so overwhelmed by loss that I wouldn't question their authority or investigate their claims. They were wrong. When the police arrested Michael and Patricia for murder, insurance fraud, and forgery, I was sitting in my lawyer's office, going over the life insurance claim that would now be processed without investigation. $2 million. Plus the house. Plus the satisfaction of knowing that justice had been served. Michael and Patricia had killed my husband for money they thought they could steal from me. They'd gambled that grief would make me weak, that I'd accept their lies about inheritance and ownership. Instead, grief had made me thorough. The trial was swift. The evidence was overwhelming. Security footage of the poisoning. Forged documents with Michael's fingerprints. Text messages between Michael and Patricia planning the whole thing, dating back 3 months. They'd been planning James's murder since they found out about the life insurance policy. Michael got life without parole. Patricia got 25 years as an accessory. During the sentencing, the judge asked if I wanted to make a victim impact statement. I stood up in that courtroom and looked at the 2 people who'd killed my husband and tried to steal my life. You called me family, I said. You sat next to me at his funeral. You held my hand while I cried. And all the while, you knew you'd murdered him. You knew you were planning to rob me while I grieved. Patricia was crying. Michael stared straight ahead. You thought grief would make me weak. You thought I'd be too destroyed to fight back. You were wrong about that, just like you were wrong about everything else. I paused, looking at them one last time. James used to say that family isn't about blood, it's about love. You never loved him. You just saw him as an obstacle to money you thought you deserved. But he loved me enough to make sure I'd be taken care of if anything happened to him. Even if he couldn't have imagined that anything would be his own brother's greed. After the trial, I sold the house. I couldn't live there anymore, knowing what had happened in my kitchen that night. But I didn't leave empty-handed. I used part of the insurance money to start a foundation in James's name, helping families navigate the legal system after losing a loved one to crime. Too many people get taken advantage of when they're grieving, just like Michael and Patricia tried to do to me. The rest of the money I invested carefully. James had always worried about our financial security. Turns out his love and planning had secured my future better than he'd ever imagined. I kept one thing from the house, his tomato plants. I dug them up before I moved and replanted them in the garden of my new home. They're thriving. Every time I see those red tomatoes, I remember that last morning. James worrying about simple things, normal things, having no idea it would be his last day. But I also remember something else. Love leaves traces that greed can't erase. James protected me even after death, not just with insurance policies and legal documents, but by teaching me to be strong enough to fight for what's right. Michael and Patricia thought they could erase me from James's story. Instead, they wrote themselves out of it permanently. And me? I'm still here. Still standing. Still tending to the things James loved. They bet everything on my weakness. They lost everything to my strength. Some gambles cost more than money. Sometimes they cost everything.